designer, architect, urban planner of color, where we don't really exist within our field. It's something that becomes a bit of a luxury when you're actually able to see someone that looks like you or speaks like you or reminds you of someone from your upbringing. So today's lecture I'm going to give you guys, I'll try my best not to be extremely wordy, which sometimes I can be, and my students remind me of that. So I'll try to be brief and get to the portion where we're in a conversation, which is why I think is more fruitful and things are more interesting. So the topic of the presentation today is going to be a picture of me sitting on the steps. There we go. Okay. Made in Opa-locka. So Opa-locka, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is in northwest Miami-Dade. It's a very old city in comparison to its neighboring cities such as Miami Gardens. It was created around the exact same time as Coral Gables, and that is a themed city. And by theme, there's an architectural inspiration that's used by Glenn Curtis, who was the young man at the time who pioneered the city. And that theme was Moorish architecture. And that Moorish architecture manifested itself into street names named Alibaba and Sinbad and Aladdin, as well as massive structures that resemble something out of Arabian Nights. So it's a very interesting city. It's a very small city. It's roughly 3 square miles. And the predominant demographic are those who are identified as Black, and the secondary demographic are those who identify as Cuban. See, this is going to be an issue. So, made in Opa-locka. A while ago, 2011, the OLCDC, the Opa-locka Community Development Corporation, received a grant from NEA, the National Endowment of the Arts, to redevelop a neighborhood called the Triangle. The Triangle is notorious as a place that at one point in time had the largest murder rate in the entire United States. And this is a neighborhood that's maybe 1/4 mile across. That's how large it is, and it had the largest murder rate in the entire United States. And the people that actually ran the city at the time thought it was a smart idea to close off the city. So to barricade the city so that the residents or the drug dealers had nowhere to run and escape the police. In doing so, they made their own citizens prisoners of their own neighborhood. And then when this happened, a lot of the people who called the Triangle home fled the area and left and moved away. So this neighborhood became extremely forgotten. It became run down. It became a location where most people would not like to frequent. And I thought it was a good idea to move there. So what happened is the team that I was a part of in Los Angeles decided that we would apply to this competition and show that you can use architecture and design to help neighborhoods and redevelop neighborhoods and revitalize neighborhoods. And our key component was that one of us would have to live in the neighborhood, because we didn't want to be one of those teams that said, we want to help you, but we want to help you from a distance. We want to stay in sunny Los Angeles. We want to stay in our awesome apartments. And then we want to just throw money at you and good designs and say, if you do this, it'll work. And as someone who's from Chicago, as someone who's from a predominantly Black area in Chicago, on the west side of Chicago, which if you follow the news, is one of the more dangerous areas in the city that we call home. This was like going back home for me. So I told my team, I said, I had no problem moving to this area. Even though I'm not from Opa-locka, I look like the people that live there. I probably talk like the people that live there. So it really shouldn't be that big of a deal. So this is me inside of the house. The first thing I did when I got there is I took pictures of every single house in the neighborhood. So I walked around with the camera in the middle of the street and I photographed every single home just to understand what the landscape was like. Of course, a couple people asked me if I was a police officer, because who takes photographs of other people's houses? To which I replied, do I look like a cop, man? Like, seriously? And they said, all right, so what are you doing? So I'm working on a project. The project I'm working on is seeing how we can help this neighborhood using architecture. So in order for me to do that, I need to document the actual area. And so this is what I found. Interesting thing about the triangle, right? I mean, of course, it looks like a triangle. Would you believe that out of 120 structures, 15% of those are churches? Right? So one of the things you learned about people of color is they're very big on faith. And it's how do I manifest my faith? How am I able to understand what's going on? How do I continue to move forward while there's so many things in the environment in the world that are weighing down on me? And one of those things is through faith. So what I found very interesting when I moved here, walking around, it's like, man, there are a lot of churches. Like, there's not even enough people to support all of these churches. Like, you see congregations that it's the pastor and his wife, and that's the congregation. That's it. But at the same time, it's a bit endearing because you're seeing that despite what these people are dealing with, they're able to find a way to influence their environment, and they're using their religion as a way. So what I did was I walked around the neighborhood and I started to identify what things were missing in the area. Things that we consider luxuries, like a place to wash our clothes, a park, a place to eat, things of this nature that we take for granted if we live in Coral Gables, or we live in Brickell, or we live in Key Biscayne, and things of this nature, which they don't have the luxury of actually having on a daily basis. And as someone that lives there, I can tell you, I have to go to North Miami in order to get groceries from Publix because it's a food desert. I have to go to a coworker's house who's awesome enough to let me do my laundry there because I don't have a washer and dryer, because I live in the exact same neighborhood that the people that we're trying to help. And to give you an idea, this is a church, one of the churches in the area, right? Another church, they're everywhere. That's not a church, that's a house, but it's a below standard house. And this is what people live in the area. But what you also learn when you're actually within an environment and you're a skill that you have a degree for, you might not be a psychologist or an architect or an engineer, but you might make the best jam in all of North Miami. You might have the best barbecue north of Broward that nobody knows about, right? But everybody in your neighborhood knows about it. And so what we wanted to find out was, is there any way that we can help these individuals capitalize off the skills that they got through apprenticeship, which is like a technical term, but in reality, it's sitting in the kitchen watching your grandma cook, or it's going outside and helping your dad use a hammer and nails to fix some things because you can't afford a contractor to do it for you. But these are physical skills that the people in the neighborhood have that we're able to try to find out, okay, how can we use this? How can we promote you? How can we allow you to thrive so that you don't have to be displaced out of this neighborhood? I was on a roll. Another structure that's there. So this is what is found within the neighborhood. So when you see so many buildings in this condition, you try to figure out, how can we change the appearance of this? How can we take these houses and these buildings and then turn this into vibrant pieces of architecture and art that people will be proud to say is within my neighborhood? And so we came up with a plan. And that plan was get out, canvass the neighborhood, meet the people, find out what they think they need in their neighborhood, because there's nothing worse than someone who's never lived there to tell you what you need. How many consultants do we know to come in and say, hey, I have the perfect answer to all of your problems. Here's a 75-page booklet, give me $45,000, and this is going to fix everything. And they leave and go back to whatever awesome place they came from. And then you find out of that 100-page document, only 3 pages actually applies to what the people in the neighborhood actually need. So, in us doing this investigation, we found that one thing is they needed to see people. They were sold so many promises, they had no idea what was real and what was fake. And so the first thing I did was go to the neighborhood school. This is a cool little kid. He's with the 500 role models. And what they do is if you're middle school and you're about to go up to 7th and 8th grade, you become a tour guide, right? And so like you're like the big man on campus. So he's the guy that walked me around. He was like, all right, I know this whole place. I'm gonna show you everything. That's the lunchroom. That's here. Like, this is what you got to do. I was like, all right, man, you know, I got to take a picture of you. Like, you have to be in my presentation. Like, you're awesome, right? And so of course I picked with him a little bit. I was like, man, you about 45 hanging around with 10-year-olds. Like, at some point we got to get you up to high school so you can run things. And so a lot of these kids had no idea what an architect was, what an architect does, because another thing you learn about when you grow up in a family of color, your parents only know 2 jobs, doctor and a lawyer. So those are the only 2 things they know that are lucrative professions or are distinguished professions. Son, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer. It's like, nah, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be an architect. All right, you're adorable, that's sweet. You're going to go through this, you're going to become a doctor, you're going to become a lawyer. But the whole time in my head, I was like, all right, this lady's crazy. It's not going to happen. I'm going to be an architect. I've always known this. When you grow up down the street from where Frank Lloyd Wright lived, you don't have a choice but to become an architect, right? Like if you're born in Chicago and you can throw a rock from your house and it's like, man, this is an iconic architect, this is iconic architecture, there's nothing you can do about that. So despite the fact that she lived in denial for my entire life until I got to a point where I guess she just got tired of arguing with me and was like, okay, you know what, fine. But if you want to fall back on it, you know, a lawyer is a better career. It's like, lady, please leave me alone. Because at the end of the day, a lot of people of color, they think that the finance is the part that makes a career successful. Whereas I know I don't enjoy reading at all. And one of the main components of being a lawyer is reading pages after pages after pages. I don't like words. I like books that just have a lot of pictures. Architecture, it works for me, right? And then I'm pretty good at math, so they work in conjunction. So I can still be a nerd, Ma, but I won't have to be a nerd with reading. I can be a nerd with math, and then I can just leave that stuff alone, right? So it's always exposing these kids to new opportunities that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. And so the first thing that we came up with was this Made in Opa-locka exhibition at History Miami, so that we can kind of promote the area. We can get people who had never been to Opa-locka, who don't want to go to Opa-locka, who are more likely to go to History Miami and then find out more about the city. And so we came up with these cool flags and this cool slogan and this font and everything. And I made a whole lot of models and destroyed my fingers. And this idea is we can design in Opa-locka, we can cook in Opa-locka, we can bike in Opa-locka. Everything we do in other cities, why can't we do them within Opa-locka? Like, it's there. Why not use it? It's the one location within Miami-Dade that neighbors every single means of transportation. You have a tri-rail station, it has its own airport, you have the Palmetto, you have 95, you have State Route 9. I can get anywhere I want except for Coral Gables in 15 minutes from Opa-locka, right? Coral Gables is its own monster. When you hit useless one, it's like it's over. It's over from that point. And so this is us getting people who are either from the area or not from the area into the place so they can actually see what's going on. And so branding, right? So how do we market the area? We thought it was an interesting photograph. So me and my design colleague decided to take some of the houses and just put on our face and then take pictures like that to kind of show people a sort of guerrilla propaganda, right, of what the area is. And so we thought it was an interesting photograph. My students like it, so I try to keep it in there. And so this is us taking one of the properties and just saying, you know what, nobody uses the house. Why don't we just put a whole lot of flyers on it so we can get some support and get people understanding what's going on, right? So nobody's using it, it's abandoned. Nobody's really gonna miss it if we put on it. At the end of the day, if they wanna knock it down, they can knock it down. But for now, let's just use what we have at our disposal. And so we went and we did this, came with these little pop-up tents. Cool, and this is us in the neighborhood, another church. You guys thought I was kidding when I said the thing about the church thing. There's another church in the background. They're everywhere. And so we were out there trying to get support in the neighborhood, and what we learned is because there's no park, a lot of times the kids have to play in the street. So I guess that's a good thing about closing off the streets with barricades, because cars can't go through. But at the same time, you lose the ability to be connected to the rest of the environment, because once you go into this area, you're stuck. There's one way in, there's one way out. It's a dead end. And so from there, again, learning Opa-locka, which we are fortunate enough to have a couple schools and an awesome preschool. Thanks for the support for coming out. You know, it's things like this that allow children in the area to understand that I don't have to go very far to get a quality education. And in the end of the day, if you start them young, is when they have the better opportunity. One of the fascinating things I learned once I moved to Miami and actually started to learn more about the Early Learning Coalition is the startling fact about when you realize the prison system and the age that they allocate based off of reading is how it's the third grade is when they decide how many beds you'll need in the prison 15 years later. And it freaked me out. It's like, how can you tell if a third grader is going to be in prison or not? Like, this is absurd. Like, how can you do this? But at the same time, these are the things that are lacking in most communities. And this is one of those communities where it was lacking until recently, when we're trying to get more arts programming, more fundamentals, because if they don't have those basic fundamentals, they'll never catch up. And so ownership. How do you keep people in a neighborhood from destroying the things that you give them? How do you keep people in the neighborhood for upkeeping those things and having pride in those new interventions? And so we're calling them the public houses, not to be confused with public housing, because that has its own negative connotation, right? So it's how do we take this word, how do we take these two words put together and give it a totally different sense of meaning? And the public houses are basically places for convening. It's places that people in the neighborhood can meet together, can hang out, and do it without any kind of problems whatsoever. And so this is what we learned from canvassing the community, that they wanted a full park. They didn't have a park. They wanted a place for gathering. They wanted like an art gallery. They wanted an actual place, a concert hall, a flexible space that they can actually have weddings and dinners and parties, because those type of facilities don't exist within Opa-locka. They have to go to Miami Garden and patronize. They have to go to North Miami and patronize. They have to go to Broward and patronize. So here's our first project. It's the Magnolia North Park. And it was this vacant lot. There was nothing there. And then after a month of, maybe like a year of planning, which everybody thinks is the fastest thing, it is not. Planning a community involved event like this took a lot of elbow grease and a lot of sweat equity, but we finished it. The best thing about this park was it was totally community driven. The children in the community picked the playground equipment. The people that live there helped actually build the playground. And I always tell this story because it's like the best anecdote I have since I've been in Miami. And it's that there's this young man lived in the neighborhood. And if you go to Opa-locka, you see every now and then you might see a couple drug dealers or whatnot, but that's what you find when you find most low income communities, because that's what they think is a means of income. So there's a young guy who's standing there watching me cut piece of wood after piece of wood after piece of wood. In my head, I'm like, are you gonna help? Or are you just gonna stand here and you're gonna just stare at me? Because I've been doing this about 5 hours, my arms are dead, so either you're gonna keep staring at me or you're gonna come help me. And so he looks at me and says, well, I don't know how to use a saw. It's not really my thing. I don't really want to help. So I dropped everything and said, first of all, man, your kid's going to play in this playground. So I'm doing this for you. I don't have kids. So at the end of the day, this isn't for me. So if you want to be proud of this, why don't you come on over and then you help? Well, I don't know how to use it. I'll teach you how to use a saw. Like, it's not that hard. I'll show you how to do it. We can do this together like an assembly line. By the time we're finished, I can be done because I've been out here all day for 3 days in a row and I'm exhausted. He comes over to help after me basically cursing him out, and then he decides to help. And so he finished helping. He gives me like maybe 3 hours, then he eats. He's like, all right, man, I got to take off. I got to go. So he leaves. Next day, we finish the entire park, and I see him and his daughter. And his daughter's playing on the playground equipment. And I'm watching. I'm like, all right, I want to see if he's going to point to the stuff that he helped build. And the first thing he says to her is, you see that over there? Your dad built that, right? So you're able to see like the full manifestation of what is actually happening. And since then, he's making sure that his knucklehead hoodlum friends aren't destroying the things that he helped build, because now he has ownership over it, right? It's like, how do we make sure that you don't destroy the things that are yours? We have to have you be a part of it. If we do it all for you, if we hold your hand, you have less ownership over it. You don't care as much. You probably take care of your shoes better than the pair of shoes someone gives to you. Architecture in the built environment works the exact same way. And so from there, close up on the equipment that the kids picked, awesome colors. This is the kids out there on the table and stuff we built. And then we went and spoke with FIU, who were awesome. They have a landscape architect there named Roberto Rivera, who was a great, helpful hand. He even gave us some of the students that worked there, and they drew that beautiful mural in the background on an abandoned building. Of course, they asked us, like, can we draw on this? I said, man, that building should be knocked down. Somebody got a problem, they can come find me. They won't find me, so let's just call it a day. Just knock it out and do it. Which brings us to the next part of the public houses, which is the Arts and Recreation Center. And so this is a 4,000 square foot. It used to be a roofing company. And so we decided to buy it and then renovate it. And then we got this awesome designer out of New York to design the beautiful mural that you see there, which I had like a 45-minute argument with the city officials about, because in their head, it had to be of Moorish architectural influence. I said, are you looking at the same image I'm looking at? It's like everything on it is Moorish. It might not be the traditional means and methods that you're accustomed to, but who says it can't be avant-garde? Who says it can't be modern? This is 2015. We don't have to live like it's 1935. I'm pretty sure you would not want to go back to 1935. So just let us do what we got to do and get out of our way. So Eventually they did, and they let us get to it, which led us to the actual street painting, right? I mean, you need something to call attention to the neighborhood as somebody's driving through so they don't speed out of the neighborhood. Because the one street, Alibaba Avenue, can take you from one edge of the city through the other edge of the city. And it takes no longer than 5 minutes. And before you know it, you're in Opa-locka. Just like that, you're out of Opa-locka and you missed everything. So we got 400 volunteers to come out starting at 4 o'clock in the morning to help paint the street. Right? And we're out there and we're putting layers on layers on layers. And I always find it very interesting that Opa-locka is one of the few cities in Miami-Dade County that has bike lanes. For as backwards as the city is, to have bike lanes is a pretty great thing. It shows that somebody in the planning department is actually thinking about how to move the city forward towards the 21st century. I was fortunate enough to be placed on the city's planning council. There's people on the board that have been there for maybe 30 years that are great at having the history and the wisdom of people who are born and raised in Opa-locka, but nobody could read a set of floor plans. Nobody could read a city plan. Nobody understood the terminology that came with comprehensive planning or urban planning. And so in my head, I would ask myself, how do you guys plan to know if you're selecting the right information if nobody's able to actually understand and comprehend what they're reading? And so the biggest hurdle that I always find is nobody ever takes me seriously because I look like I'm 17. It's like, there's not much I can do about that. But at the same time, I've gone through enough education, I have enough life experience, and that there's certain things that I do understand, there's certain things that I do know, and I don't claim to know everything because I honestly understand that with gray hair comes wisdom, and I don't have any gray hair yet, so I don't really have that wisdom, but just pure technical logic, like a 6-foot sidewalk versus a 30-foot sidewalk, like those are things that I understand. And so them allowing me to actually give that expertise and help move forward the planning of the actual city, which has resulted in now a brand new comprehensive plan, a brand new land use regulations and plans, where I would fight back and forth with city officials until we got to a point where it made sense. Because there are things that it blew my mind, just the basic manifestations of architecture within the city that were being ignored. It's like, it's one thing to embrace your history, it's another thing to ignore your history. You have to find some kind of balance between the two. And the young man that actually did the street painting, designed it, is a landscape architect out of Oakland named Walter Hood, who does fantastic work. So the two of us in conjunction came up with quite a bit of this stuff to actually execute the entire proposal. And so this is the inside of the space. So we regularly hold events in art galleries, art events that we're able to get people to come out who otherwise would never come to Opa-locka to actually see it. Because the biggest thing is changing the narrative, right? It's how do we get people to come to the neighborhood who have preconceived notions but have never actually visited. They think it's the worst place in Miami-Dade County, but they get there and they're totally blown away by it's not anything that they imagine. I find that quite a bit. I tell people, no, just come to the event, just trust me, it's safe, there's parking everywhere, just don't worry, this is an okay place to come hang out. And they'll come, oh man, this is nothing like I imagined. I thought it was gonna be awful. So that's why you can't believe everything you read. It's like, you have to actually go out, get in your car, drive there, and see what's available. And then once you do that, you're definitely able to have a totally different perspective than someone who just did it from their computer screen. Because of course, if it's on the internet, that means it's true. And so the next intervention that we're proposing is our urban garden, our urban farm. And so, as I mentioned before, it's a food desert. And how do you solve a food desert? You take matters into your own hands and you use open space and you create a garden for the people who live in the area. And so we're fortunate enough to have quite a bit of extra land behind the Arts and Recreation Center. And so this is the proposal. This is a rendering of what's going to come. We're fortunate enough to get some funding to get this off the ground. And now it's about us galvanizing the community again. We had some students canvass and find out what type of food should be grown there, what type of vegetables and whatnot. As someone from a city that doesn't have a lot of trees, or even for that matter, fruit trees, I had no idea that with those come rodents and things of that nature, like those things, raccoons and stuff. These things I just didn't understand. That I was able to learn, because in Chicago we probably have like three tree types, and they're just like really big trees, but I don't know what they're actually called. And so we spoke with some people in the area who have the expertise. That's urban agriculture. And so this is our next pilot project we're getting off the ground, which I think is going to be extremely successful for the simple point of students are able to see farm to fork, right? So they're able to see where their food comes from. They're able to cultivate their food, and they're able to actually eat healthier. And if you start them at a younger age, they're more likely to eat healthy as they get older, as opposed to when we get older and we think we know everything and we don't want to touch food because it looks icky. It's a lot easier to get kids to do it when they're younger, and you make it seem cool, and they'll eat just about anything. They'll eat a Brussels sprout if you make it cool. So that's what we're trying to do. And so that's the end of the presentation. I thank you guys for being such attentive listeners. And now we're going to open it up to questions and answers. Thank you.
So good afternoon.